Imagine falling off a building. As you're falling off this building, you're going to feel completely weightless. Now, imagine being in an elevator shaft. The cable gets cut. As you're free falling, your body's actually going to float in that elevator shaft. Once again, feeling completely weightless. This is the exact thought experiment or daydream Albert Einstein had that led him to his general theory of relativity. An English scientist by the name of Paul Dirac proclaimed that the general theory of relativity is probably the greatest scientific discovery ever made. I personally have been doing research on Albert Einstein for a couple years now. I find the man absolutely fascinating. So I feel as though I'm the perfect candidate to give you guys a little bit of information on Albert Einstein. So today we're going to cover Albert Einstein's early years, his transition into the scientific world, and his accomplishments. So let's start out with his early years. Albert Einstein, when he was younger, was a terrible student. He constantly cut class. If it wasn't math or science, he didn't care. I mean, his dad actually died thinking that he was a disgrace. That's pretty crazy to think about, knowing the Albert Einstein we know and love today. Well, according to the author of Albert Einstein, Physicist and Genius, Foreman states that Einstein graduated Polytechnic in 1900. So he graduates college, he has a diploma, but because of how terrible a student he was, he couldn't find a job anywhere. Well, a friend finally enables him to get a job as a patent clerk. That brings me to my next point, and that is his transition into the scientific world. So, a patent is what you write when you invent something, so that your idea don't get stolen. Well, Albert Einstein's job was to review these patents, work out all the kinks, and make sure it all added up. By doing this, he actually honed in his science and math skills. Well, as a patent clerk, he wrote 4 scientific papers. This was in 1905, and it was known as Albert Einstein's Miracle Year. The first paper was the photoelectric effect. Now, this has to do with light beams, so you think of light as a beam. In reality, it's a tiny little particle known as a photon. Without this piece of information, we would not have televisions, we would not have lasers. Another paper he wrote proved that atoms existed. In those days, we didn't believe atoms even existed. Not only did he prove that atoms existed, he actually calculated the size. So, the size of an atom would be like a football field compared to the entire Earth. That's pretty incredible to be able to do that. Another paper he wrote had his famous equation E equals mc squared. That simply just means energy can become mass, mass can become energy. That's how the stars light up. It's how the universe works. His final paper he wrote was his special theory of relativity. This paper is a little more mind-boggling. This takes space and time and bends them together to a 4th dimension. So, space between you and I is space, and combines that in a 4th dimension. I mean, that makes absolutely no sense. To scientists in the time, it didn't make sense to them either. It wasn't until 1909 that a theoretical physicist by the name of Max Planck understood what he was trying to say. And that brings me to my next point, and that is Albert Einstein's accomplishments. So, in 2015, a book titled Albert Einstein, Revolutionary Physicist, it states that in 1909, Einstein was offered a job as a professor at the University of Zurich. Well, let's jump back 2 years. So in 1907, he realizes there's something missing with his special theory of relativity. It does not incorporate gravity. True Einstein fashion, he's not okay with Isaac Newton's law of gravity. So you think gravity pulls us down to Earth, right? Wrong. It's actually space-time pushing us. So, imagine the sun. The sun is 300,000 times bigger than the Earth. It actually bends the space around it. Well, in order to prove this, he needed to capture a picture of a solar eclipse. So solar eclipse is when the moon blocks the sun. So his idea was, if he got a picture of a solar eclipse, the stars that lie beyond the sun, as the light beam from them is coming in, it will actually bend. Because space and time is bent, it will bend, and it will appear as though those stars are in a different part of the universe. Well, the problem with a solar eclipse is it happens 1 every 18 months. The shadow it casts on Earth is only about a mile wide, so it only happens in a certain part of the Earth. Well, there's a war going on at the time. You have to deal with cloud cover, so there's a lot of problems you run into. Well, as he's waiting for his results, he decides to tackle a problem that is Mercury's orbit. So, Earth's orbit looks like this. It's a nice elliptical, goes around the sun in a beautiful elliptical. Mercury's orbit, on the other hand, looks a little something like this. more like the petals of a flower. Well, Isaac Newton's theory of gravity could not explain why Mercury's orbit did that. Well, Albert Einstein used his general theory of relativity and actually calculated Mercury's orbit, proving to himself that his general theory of relativity is right. Now all he has to do is wait for the results. That does not come until 1922. Well, 1922, he gets his results, and sure enough, the stars appear to be in a different part of the universe. His theory is right. That is insane to think about. That space and time is bent and gravity is not what we've been taught this whole time. It's completely different. Well, also in 1922, he was awarded the Nobel Prize. Not for his general theory of relativity, though, but for the photoelectric effect. And that is what I discussed earlier with the light, the tiny little particles known as photons. It's how we have TVs and lasers. In conclusion, Albert Einstein is a fascinating man. Without him, we would not know atoms existed. He single-handedly changed the way we think about the universe. Now, I'm hoping y'all not only know now that Albert Einstein's a genius, but now know a few reasons why we call the man a genius. Thank you.